Hi, I'm Aoyolaipe. Hi, I guess. My custom decal is out. Good for you. I need to advertise it. Sure. You are the advertisement. I'm sorry, what? You're all gonna die, poof. Alright, let's start the show. Hello. I am Aoyolaipe, and I like to hop into top tier matches in War Thunder and then personally kill the entire enemy team by myself. Welcome to my channel. My custom decal has been released, and you can get it by purchasing anything using my custom store link in the description. Now, the plane on the decal, and the one I use as a profile picture, is actually this specific MiG-21 variant right here. This is the MiG-21S R13300. This is the plane I use to teach myself how to play top tier, and it's also a great plane to fly if you want to hear all sorts of new and exciting racial slurs, because boy does this jet piss people off. So yeah, for all the shenanigans I pull with rank 7 and 8 tech tree jets, my favorite plane in this game is actually this weird rank 6 Golden Eagle Premium. And yup, I painted a giant target on my back that says "Missed Me," and then ran around mowing down entire lobbies full of infuriated people with the plane on the target on the decal on the plane. Now, if you're a long-time viewer, you'll know that this channel got its first few thousand subscribers about 2 years ago when a guy went nuts and stalked me outside of the game for 3 weeks over a single air arcade match. And this is the plane I used in that match, which, literally drove him insane. So, in other words, that random guy's revenge quest backfired so spectacularly that I've now been anthropomorphized as the plane that did that to him and permanently added to the game by the developers. I know War Thunder is not a game you can ever really win or lose, but I think that's about as close as you can get. Now, the reason this plane generates so much salt is pretty straightforward to explain. It's a weird one-off jet that might as well be perfectly designed to be misunderstood by new players, and it's a premium, which means it is mostly bought by new players who have no idea what they're doing. As a result, this plane is heavily under-tiered compared to its horrifying potential, and you can reach this horrifying potential so long as you're willing to be morally flexible about the tactics. So I'm going to explain the basics of this plane, like what makes it tick, and then I'm going to show you how these features come together to sometimes make it almost mathematically impossible to actually kill this thing. And then I'm going to show you how to pair that with deception operations to really drive up the body count. For instance, one of the classic tricks is that if you get the tactics down right, it can actually become harder to kill you if people try to kill you, because they pretty much always do it wrong. So like, if they focus you, it's actually easier to kill them, harder for them to kill you. And what that means is baiting the entire enemy team into trying to kill you is sometimes a legitimate survival strategy. So that's kind of what's happening here in this match with this guy, right? He was angry, so I explained that he missed me, and so did all of his teammates, and that's why I killed them all, and that's why they're all dead. Which, I mean, I felt that was pretty self-explanatory because I literally wrote that explanation on the plane they have to look at every time I kill them. Although, maybe they missed it, like, I don't know. Actually, in my last video, I said I was going to feature the first person to kill me with my own decal, but the problem with that is I later realized that I pretty much always forget to look super closely at the planes that killed me. So if you killed me with my own decal, I legitimately might not notice. So I don't know, I'll feature the first time someone kills me with my own decal and I notice. I mean, or something like that. Sooner or later, I will feature someone who kills me with my own decal. All right, let me sort of fast forward to the end of this match. Now, I faced a mountain of salt, and you're definitely going to see why this plane pisses everyone off, but the best example of how to actually fly it involved the game with very minimal salt. And the reason I'm picking this match is because it happened to be particularly brutal up tier. And the whole time you're watching this, you'll be like, no way is that an up tier. Oh, but it is. This plane is very under tiered, and there are reasons for this. And as is standard for my videos, there will be a kill counter written in Comic Sans. First things first, the basic flight characteristics of the MiG-21. This thing has amazing speed, awful energy retention, and fantastic turn time. In situations like this, the speed is the big advantage and the turn time is a giant red herring. Trying to turn and burn people with any MiG-21 in TTAA is almost always a terrible idea because it's guaranteed to brick your speed, and being slow means you die. And due to the afterburner cap, if you lose your speed, you can't get it back quickly. New players have a natural instinct to turn fight people, and new players also tend to buy premiums. So it's very common for people to buy this thing and then play it in the worst way possible. That is a core reason it is under-tiered, particularly in arcade. I mean, I know people like to scream pay to win about this stuff, but the sad fact is that the premium jets in this game are actually pretty balanced. I think this is just a situation where Gaijin gave new players a bad plane for new players and then balanced it accordingly. Like, that is absolutely something they would do. Anyways, the major advantage of this plane, like the reason people buy the MiG-21S, is that it has the R3R radar missile, and new players will not have the slightest goddamn idea how to use this missile effectively either. On paper, the R3R sucks. Apart from its guidance, the stats are identical to the AIM-9B, which is a famously terrible, useless missile. However, the R3R has two key advantages. First, it's an all-aspect missile because all radar-guided missiles are all-aspect by definition. But more than that, it's a very slow all-aspect missile. The reason that's an advantage is that slow all-aspect missiles get under-tiered even when they're on tech tree jets. Most players just don't understand how to use them effectively, and the game is balanced around the average person's skill issues. The end result is that slow all-aspect missiles are pretty much always hilariously under-tiered for players who actually know how to use them. I've actually made 2 videos already explaining the basic math here, complete with, obnoxious diagrams to make it easy to understand and angry people to make it fun to watch. And I'll link those in the description so I won't give like a full repeat explanation here, but I'll summarize the key idea, and the key idea is that if your target is not that much slower than the missile you're shooting at it, whether you fire in the front aspect, the rear aspect, or the side aspect has a massive effect on your closing speed and range. If you fire in the rear aspect, you're going to have the worst range and closing speed relative to the target you're shooting at. If you fire in the side aspect, you'll have a massive boost, and if you fire it in the front aspect, like a head-on attack, you get an insane boost. The slower the missile, the more it matters, and the R3R is basically the slowest missile where these concepts apply. Under ideal circumstances, I have occasionally managed to kill people from 10 kilometers away with this thing, even though it has the same flight performance as the AIM-9B. That's how much of a difference knowing the angles can make, and most players just never wrap their head around that, even though it's insanely useful at times. So to put that whole explanation in another way, the first key advantage of this missile is that you can surprise people by hitting them from shockingly far away if you know how to set up the shot. However, it is not the only key advantage, and the second key advantage of this missile, and by far the most important one, is that this missile has a proximity fuse that arms extremely quickly, like it is functionally instant. So at extremely close range, a near miss will still kill someone. Virtually every other missile in the game needs a direct hit at extremely close range because their proximity fuses don't arm instantly. What this means is that at very close range, the enemy player is not really outturning the R3R itself, which would be extremely easy because it's a 12G missile moments after launch, so it doesn't even turn anywhere near 12Gs. They are, in practice, trying to outturn the missile's proximity fuse, and if you get close enough, they just won't have enough time to do that. This gives you a way to kill alert and skilled players who know what they're doing. You don't just have to rely on cheeky long-range ambushes. The catch is that because your missile is so slow, especially right after launch, it will be very easy for the enemy player to outturn the proximity fuse at close range unless you shoot them in the face. Because in a head-on, they're flying towards the missile, so the closing speed is way higher, and that means they have way less time to react. So it's a missile that is only good for surprising people long range or shooting people in the face at point-blank range. That is a very, very unique set of advantages and disadvantages for a missile, and this deeply strange plane winds up having a very unique playstyle as a result, and most players have no idea how to do any of that well. With most head-on shots for most planes, it's about 1.5 kilometers a head-on is sort of the ideal launch range. If you fire from that range, it'll be very, very difficult to dodge the missile. Still possible, we'll get to that in a second. But if you're firing a jet that is particularly small, fast, and nimble, like the MiG-15 or the F-86, you sometimes might want to get a bit closer if you can, but if you're shooting at a really slow-moving plane, it's more like 2 kilometers. Now, the problem here is that your enemies have guns, and your ideal launch range is within their gun's max range, and you're flying straight towards their guns, so they can just shoot you in the face, right? How do you solve that problem? How do you dodge bullets? Okay, so this here is an example of monkey rolling. So I'm gonna fly right at this guy, and as soon as I get close enough for him to shoot me with his guns, I'm just gonna start spinning, and then I'm gonna launch the missile once he's in my no escape range. And the no escape range for him is a bit above normal because he's moving a bit slower than normal. And the reason he could not shoot me is because I was spinning. And if that doesn't make sense, that's because it's one of those quirks of geometry that is a bit tricky to wrap your head around, but once you see it, you can't unsee it. And I'm gonna use back of the envelope math here to illustrate it. So these are only very approximate numbers, but you'll pretty quickly get the idea here. Let's say the MiG-21 is about 13 feet tall, and the distance from the missile to the center of the circle is about 5 feet. and my target is flying straight towards the middle of the circle, and I'm just trying to spin around where he will be. When I spin the MiG, my missiles will be rotating around a circle with a circumference of about 31 feet, while the tip of my MiG is rotating around a circle with a circumference of about 113 feet. You can change up the assumed numbers all you want, but the crucial concept to grasp here is that as far as my target is concerned, different parts of my jet are moving at drastically different speeds. That, combined with the constant movement, makes it absurdly difficult to actually shoot me. This sounds deeply strange, but it is the same reason why you can crack a whip and have the tip of the whip break the sound barrier, even though your hand itself does not go supersonic or anywhere close to it. It's also connected to the reason why figure skaters spin faster if they pull their arms in. This is something that was definitely explained to you at some point in some way in high school, and then 99% of you forgot it because you didn't think you would ever use it, and that's why you suck at video games. While this really subtle trick makes it way harder for the enemy player to hit me with their air-to-air cannon, it does not make it harder for me to hit him with my missiles, so long as I keep my missiles on the inside of the circle. If they were on the outside of the circle like this, it wouldn't work. I would be at a huge disadvantage. It has to be on the inside, bizarrely enough. If I keep my missiles on the inside of the circle, they move way less than the rest of the jet, and they also stay more or less lined up with the target. Remember, I don't need a direct hit. I only need to get close to proxy fuse him. And if I spin like this, it's so difficult to actually hit me in the head-on that I can close to a range where the enemy player will not have a practical chance of escaping my missile without him having a practical chance of shooting me with his cannon. There are two main ways to improve on this. The first is to jump back and forth in a semicircle like this, which is just as good, but it's even less predictable. That's what I normally do. And the second thing to do is get my decal, you know, the one that says missed me on it, so you can force enemy players to look at it every time this trick kills them. Now, the MiG-21S is not a pack premium, so you can't buy it directly with my store link, but you can buy the Golden Eagles to buy it, and if you buy those Golden Eagles with my store link, you will get my decal. And then you can, also go ahead and get the plane, and, then you can run around using geometry to ruin everyone's day. Also, a lot of people won't shoot until you're closer than 1.5 kilometers anyways, and if they're going really slow, they won't have enough energy to dodge it if you launch from like 2 kilometers away, so you often don't even need to bother monkey rolling. Also, quick side note about the background footage, F-104s are one of the only planes that are faster than you at this battle rating, so if one of them chases you, just lead them on a chase away from the other players, and it'll take them a while to catch up, and you should just wait until they are just barely within gun range before turning the tables. You can easily turn and burn an F-104, but you will still get third party doing so in TTAA, unless you lead the F-104 to an isolated spot first. But anyways, let's get back to monkey rolling. How do you counter this? If you're on the receiving end of this, like if the MiG-21Ss are driving you insane, the best way to counter this is actually to load stealth rounds. This is particularly effective with the F-84 or any of the F-86s that get the 50 cals, because those rounds are very high velocity and therefore very long range, and they can fire a lot of them very quickly. So if you load stealth rounds into one of those jets, you can open fire in a head-on and have a good chance of hitting an incoming MiG-21 from about 3 kilometers. That's much further than most players realize, and if you load stealth rounds, the MiG-21 will probably be hit and killed before they ever realize you're shooting at them, and that means they won't take evasive action. You can gain an even bigger advantage by disabling some of your plane's gun modifications, like if you have it spaded, go in and click off the mods. There are modifications that tighten the spread of your gun, but if you take them off, you get more of a shotgun effect. Normally that's not a good thing, but if you can send 1,000 rounds downrange at a target that will die in like 2 or 3 hits, you want the shotgun effect. Okay, but let's get back to flying the MiG-21. Okay, let's say you're a MiG-21, you monkey roll someone and you miss. What do you do then? Aren't they just gonna turn around and kill you? No, because you can just outrun their turn. I have a whole video explaining this that I'll link in the description. Actually, I have 2. I have 2 videos on this as well. I'll link the description, but I will also re-explain the basics here. The MiG-21S is one of the earliest planes in the game that can go so fast that if it flies right past the enemy player, and the enemy player turns around to counterattack, the MiG-21 can be out of gun range on the other side before the enemy player can finish their 180-degree turn. Also, the MiG-21 is very fast, and doing a 180-degree turn probably murdered your enemy's speed, but you didn't have to do it because you just flew straight. So it's basically impossible for them to chase you down if you do this. So if you run around monkey rolling people and outrunning turns, you are not guaranteed to win the fight, but if you do it right, you're virtually guaranteed not to lose the fight. In other words, you're not looking for an endless series of wins, you're looking for an endless series of wins and washes. And that's kind of the only thing that holds this plane back, because for the most part, you're killing people one by one, and most nutty kill streaks you get by, you know, atrocious multi-kills. Trust me on this. And you can outrun the turns of large groups of players simultaneously. Let me splice in some footage here as an example. As you can see, you can use this tactic to slip right through the entire enemy team unharmed, so long as they are all pointed in the same direction and you fly through them head on. And you also are decent dodging bullets, and crucially, none of the enemy players have good missiles. And I'll explain how to deal with the good missiles in a minute. So yes, there are a lot of enemy players here, but there's a lot of enemy players who can't kill me for the same basic reason. So flying through a whole swarm of enemy players is kind of like running over hot coals. Like, it looks scary, but you can't get hurt as long as you move quickly. Enemy players usually line up like this coming out of their spawn, so if you just kind of run down the Congo line of enemy players, even if you started in the middle of the map, you will usually end by passing through the enemy spawn. Some people call this spawn camping, but I don't really understand how it's spawn camping if you're not camping. It's more like knocking down a line of dominoes. And also, as you can see here, when they turned around to try to get me, they lost their energy just making big turns and then big climbs, right? I'm just flying a straight line and forcing them to turn when I don't have to, and that just murders their energy. Man, I feel like I have a target on my back or something. And this whole running over hot coals thing is also why baiting people in chat is actually part of the survival strategy sometimes. If you say something punchable in chat, and make sure it's punchable, not toxic, because if you say something toxic, people leave, but if it's punchable, people want to kill you. And if the entire enemy team just starts chasing you, then they're all facing the same direction. And if they're all facing the same direction and none of their jets are fast enough to chase you, then none of them can kill you, because you can just turn around, force a head-on with their entire team simultaneously over and over and over again and whittle them down one by one. And because you can monkey roll and outrun their turns, it's basically impossible for them to get you. While there are counter moves to this, at some point in the game, you start to realize that none of the enemy players know the counter moves, and that's when you can bait them. I mean, if you've just been like slaughtering everyone for like the last like 8 minutes or something, and someone knew how to stop you, they would have stopped you by now. Also, if they scatter, you might run out of gas before you can kill them all, but if you bait them into chasing you and they're coming to you, that's a much more fuel efficient way to kill them. This is what I did to that guy who stalked me outside the game. I baited his team in the chat to save gas, and it worked, and then I killed his entire team, and he really did not take it well. I tried to explain after the game that the trash talking was tactical in nature, like I was doing it to save gas, but he thought that was complete nonsense and I was just doing it to be a douchebag. Things spiraled out of control from there, and long story short, I now have almost 50,000 subscribers. And what's crazy is that it's also extremely easy to stop a MiG-21 from outrunning your turn. Instead of waiting for the MiG-21 to pass you before you turn, you just start turning before he passes. Like, you punt the head-on just pre-turn to get a head start. You won't die in the head-on because this really throws off his aim. If you do it when he's like a kilometer away, he won't really have time to readjust. But pre-turning will give you enough of a head start that you can get behind him and be within range to kill him with your guns. Here's an example of a turn I did with my F8. See, it threw off the guy's aim and it forced a dogfight in my terms that he ultimately lost. Now, if you're like, hey, wait, isn't, 1 kilometer well within the no escape range for the MiG-21S's missile? And the answer is yes, but only if you're flying straight at the MiG-21. If you don't fly straight at the MiG-21S, they have to get a lot closer to kill you. It becomes a lot harder to kill you. But remember, you don't have to look straight at him and head-on. If your plan is to dodge the head-on, pre-turn, dual loop, and kill him from behind. Also, I'm aware this is not a MiG-21, I'm just using this as an example of pre-turning. Pre-turning works against any plane. It's just particularly effective against the MiG-21S. Most MiG-21S players won't expect you to do this, and as a result, they will not deploy the appropriate counter-counter moves. So if MiG-21Ss are terrorizing you, you can just pretend to get baited into head-on, and then pre-turn to kill them with their own trap. But most players just never know how to do that. Now, if these seem like BS tactics to you, that's because these are top-tier tactics. In my opinion, the two fundamental characteristics of a top-tier jet are that it can outrun turns and it has missiles that don't completely suck. So even though it's missing countermeasures and is at a relatively low battle rating, this MiG-21 variant meets both those criteria, and that means it is basically one of the earliest top-tier jets in the game. That's why the people I'm fighting tend to get really, really salty. the core skill set you need to do well in War Thunder changes when you transition from early jets to top tier. There are people who are very good at lower or mid tiers, and they just assume that's how the game will always work, but it's not. And this is the first plane that can teach them that they are mistaken. And because the transition from mid tier to top tier is a lot more acute in arcade than realistic, if you're doing this in arcade, the learning cliff can be pretty brutal, and it's not obvious how you're supposed to go around figuring out how the game works now. I have videos from early in my channel, very skilled players going to extreme lengths to kill me, but they're just using the wrong concepts to do it, so it doesn't work. In other words, welcome to top tier, and for your first opponent, you'll be facing this guy in his favorite jet. So, I mean, I certainly understand why people are always like, this is fundamentally unfair whenever they're fighting me while I'm flying this jet. I mean, yeah, I'm sure it feels that way. Okay, now the missiles. I was gonna get to this. So yeah, how do you deal with enemies who have good missiles? Well, to start with, most planes with missiles that you will encounter will have really bad first-generation infrared missiles. If you come in fast enough, you can outrun turns well enough that you can get far enough away that if they flip around and shoot at you, you can dodge the AIM-9B with only like a slight turn, and that's good enough. Now, in the past with this jet, most of my really involved strategies and tactics revolved around how to deal with jets that have really good missiles, like AIM-9Ds, AIM-9Gs, stuff like that. However, there have been battle rating changes over time that means it's uncommon for you to actually face those jets anymore, so long as you downrank your lineup to 8.7. Remember, this is a 9.0 jet in arcade, and Gaijin decompressed everything at or above the battle rating of 10.0. So, the worst competition got up-tiered out of your bracket a while ago. People downranking 10.0 jets to 9.7 to kill you in a full down tier for them, which is a full up tier for you, was the nightmare scenario here, and it's just no longer practical for them to do that. And then Gaijin, a few months ago, also went ahead and made super down tiering with multiple planes harder. So even if someone gets a plane with good missiles into your bracket, they can't get like a whole lineup. They can get one, maybe two jets into a lineup, but they can't bring like a bunch of them. So they only have to die one or two times, and they're out of your hair. So in the past, I had some very involved tactics for dealing with these people, but yeah, I just don't see them anymore. You'll see like maybe one or two planes with really good missiles in a particularly bad up tier, and your jet is faster than their jet, so you can just avoid them. You don't have to get close unless you decide to, and you just wait for them to die once, and then they're gone. Problem solved. However, if you have to fight them directly, the key thing to remember is that their very good missiles are rear aspect only. Yours are all aspect because they're radar guided. So that means you still have a huge advantage in a head-on fight. The catch is that you can't afford to miss because they actually can turn around and kill you unlike everyone else in the game. So you want to get a little closer than usual before launching. It's worth taking the risk. And you can't really dodge good missiles with this thing. Like, okay, yes, you can in theory outturn a missile, but doing so will cost you so much energy and so much speed that the other guy can just cut the corner and kill you. So for all practical intents and purposes, unless you have terrain you can duck behind and dodge the missile with like no effort, you will die not if someone hits you with a missile, but if someone shoots a missile at you. You'll die even if it misses. And yeah, Gaijin sells this thing to people who have no experience with missiles. I wonder why it's so under-tiered. And yeah, I just massacred a full up tier, 18-0 with this thing. Thank you for watching. Like and comment to feed the algorithm. And if you subscribe and ring the bell, you won't have to remember how to spell AOLIPay next time you want to watch one of my videos.